I would love to start with basic kind of introduction about you in your professional and personal life. You are an interesting person as an individual as well. But let's start with a little bit about your background, technological background, and then some of your musician kind of perspective.
Cool. So thank you for inviting me to talk here and give some of my insights. As for my background, I'm an, you could say, old school kind of hacker manifesto generated professional with computers since the 80s as a teenager. This means that I saw the promise of the internet, the the green fields of the internet before it went kaboom. But I've been with InfoSec and IT security and cybersecurity as the evolution of that for a while, for a few decades. As you mentioned, I've been practicing music as well professionally at the same time, kind of nurturing two separate career paths and juggling between them successfully, some periods of life than others. And at my spare time, I volunteer and I also fly airplanes as a private pilot.
Do you define yourself first like a cybersecurity expert or musician?
I would say first a musician and a dad, a father. My kids are grown up, so they're not in the area to disrupt us during the call, which is an advantage. But yeah, I would say musician first. Heart comes first. Although I'm also a nerd, a proud geek. If you record the movie Revenge of the Nerds from previous century, yeah, the geeks won. You control the code, you control the world, software runs the world, so we kind of won, nerds. But I also love keyboards very much, and I can't get enough of them.
It makes. What led you into cybersecurity? I mean, it was curiosity. It was like a passion about specific like computers and technology.
Combination of the hacker curiosity as a core value, curiosity being something that always draws me to learn new things and how things work, as well as the fact that I was with computers from a fairly early age, around 13 in the 80s, and the fact that I grew up in Israel in the Middle East, which is a rough neighborhood, kind of the only democracy in hundreds, thousand miles of land around us. And security is a necessity. It's not something that you choose to or ignore in your day-to-day routine. So I would say it's a mix of all those. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I mean, just to put some perspective and technical kind of expertise and your sweet spot, a little bit about what you're doing today over the last 5 years, mainly offensive research, customer engagement, a little bit background about that, so we can get into the interesting part.
Yeah, sure. So I've been doing a lot of red team pen testing in the last, I would say, over a decade at least, a couple of decades. I started out in defense mostly in the 90s as a professional, but pretty quick I understood the need to have the attacker mindset, because offense is the best defense in a way, you know, like in sports as well as in computing. And it really gives you, I think it's sort of a layer that defenders sometimes lack, which is really understanding in depth the attacker mindset, skill set, and tool set. Sort of in that order, by the way. And I've put a lot of emphasis on that. I'm a red team trainer for different organizations. But as the years go by, I tend to drift back to defense. And to be honest, it's connecting back to what you said about the challenge and keeping myself as a curious hacker. I would say the biggest challenges are in defense. Once you've practiced pen test, red team, internal, external, black box, white box, applicative, physical, Wi-Fi, you name it, and knock bypass, did everything from everything, you realize that a big challenge, if you really want to challenge yourself, is in defense. So that's why I drift back to purple team, blue team, creative defense controls, creating a secret sauce for network, as I love to call it, like quality traps for attackers, and essentially buying time for defenders. That's the main challenge that I'm trying to bring in and to organizations and solve together with them, how we delay an attacker and buy time for the defense in a time-based security approach.
You talk about the fact that defender need to be like a little bit offensive in terms of mindset. Do you think that this is like the biggest gap still today, like for defenders, whether you are SOC analyst or threat hunter?
I think in terms of the practicality of the profession, it is one of the biggest gaps, because it kind of reflects on other areas. For example, a lot of defenders still do sort of vanilla work. You know, they kind of think and do the obvious stuff, you know, the obvious checklists, rather than thinking out of the box and trying to think graphically and laterally, rather than in sort of a straightforward checklist. And it, you know, they can, for example, they can overlook the basics basics of segmentation, etc., firewall rules, just to check those from time to time, overlooking living off the land as a concept and as a mindset. I would say that's when I say defense, it's a defense as a whole, not only defenders in organizations, but also vendors that they sometimes tend to overlook with time the basics of the profession. And keeping a healthy attacker mindset and skill set really helps you stay on your toes in terms of that. And I would say also that in the bigger picture, it's also another big challenge is SecOps aligning, of course, with business. That has been and still remains to be a big thing, because sometimes in order to even know how to defend the system, you need to know the business purpose, goals, and implications of a configuration, an account, a service account, etc. So that still remains a big gap on the day-to-day.
What was the easiest kind of red team engagement and the hardest one?
So I would say easiest. I had a lot of easy ones. Going back to the challenge question, why I drift back to doing more defense, because it's harder. So many easy ones. Getting domain admins in a matter of few minutes. Like 5-7 minutes after we just plug our computer to a wall, NAC bypass, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then. So that I had a lot of those, unfortunately, and still do, even in recent time. It gets more challenging, but still, we had a few of those also in the last year or so. The biggest, I would say, I still remember, I don't know if it's a comforting fact or not, but I really, really remember the red team engagements that I had some struggle with, or it took me more than a few hours or over a day to get really good persistence and good lateral movement and privilege escalation in the network. And that was in a specific organization in Europe that the thing that they had in their network, it was a couple of years back ago, is they had a lot of emphasis on the basics, like really basics. I mean, proper segmentation, 2FA everything, separate backups from everything else, one direction. They had firewalls from workstations to that. They had proper tiering, very good use of the basic tools of hardening, group policies, things like that. And they were really monitoring kind of living off the land signals and auditing a lot of PowerShell, things like that, etc. Not allowing unsigned drivers. So what I want to say is that they didn't necessarily have a lot of tools like multiple EDRs, etc. But it was very hard to move laterally in that environment because they took care of the basics. They had every 6 months they had a firewall inspection. They check all the logs, of course, all the time, and they also see the rules that if they're missing something and they should change something. So I think that the thing I got from that challenging experience is that really basics matter, and I don't think organizations do it enough. Or I would rephrase and say enterprises find it very challenging to do back to basics in the middle of their life cycle in this hectic routine that you have to just put more and more defense tools.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with the basics. Like if you think about airplanes, for example, and the fact that the statistics for crashing is super low, is because every time you go to an airplane, it's a process. You go to an airplane, they review a checklist. They don't care if they are like 30 years in the industry. They don't care. There is like process. You need to review it, basics, fundamentals, and go to higher layers. And this is why the airplane and aviation is a good kind of industry perspective as well.
Exactly. It's not like you hear a pilot saying, that I will not check the weight and balance of my aircraft today because they know that if they put a few more hundreds of kilograms in the forward instead of the aft, then the nose will not come up and you'll run out of runway, and it could be disastrous. But you can meet IT professional that see a MFA pop up in the middle of the day and they ignore it. They don't take it, it's like alert fatigue or whatever.
There was like a management system where you can push script all over the places. And what I did, because of some arrogance and some, ego, I was pushing some sort of script that disabled pretty much all the management interfaces in the network all over the country.
That was you.
That was me. Everything turns red. Fortunately, it was just the management and not the actual, data. But it was a big mistake for me and a failure, which turns me into, I think, a better kind of professional individual. I think that for me, at least, what I learned from it is like, if you think about CrowdStrike, for example, recently, and events like that, is that even if you are super sure about whatever change and development, software configuration stuff that you're doing, I mean, graceful, pushing stuff gracefully and testing and making sure that it, doesn't do any kind of catastrophic, made me realize that regardless of your professional and your experience, you need to do it gracefully. With that, maybe if you have some interesting kind of example about any kind of previous failure for you, for customer, for the company you've been working, as far as you can tell, without hurting any kind of company name, that would be funny and interesting.
Well, failures, I've had more than few, even small ones, like somewhere in the 90s where I pressed the power button instead of the CD-ROM button, which it's like a common joke, but it really happened to me as well. Luckily, not on a very critical system, just a PC. But still, seriously, I would say the lesson learned from, the famous Spider-Man quote, to relate also to what you said, that with great power comes great responsibility. That's something that in IT security and cybersecurity, you learn very quickly. And for me, it also resonates kind of on the musical career path, because that you have a lot of power and responsibility due to what you're doing and the position you are at. Because also in music, which is it's a spiritual vehicle, right, and very communicative, you also have a big responsibility on what you do, and the deliverables tend to affect people's mood, people's lives, and you can take them through a journey which is positive or less. It really depends on the spiritual feeling, messaging, vibe, muse, etc. And also in cybersecurity, we kind of, I think we need to take the profession more seriously. You've mentioned people looking for easy, kind of not to make easy life for themselves. And in terms of that, I would say I always, the way that I learned most of my life in the industry was through books and later websites, etc. But when I started out, we only had books, then IRC forums, BBS IRC forums. But to learn a logo or basic in 80s, late 80s, or Novel Network, early 90s, MS-DOS, you just had books. That's where you learned from. And I would say my biggest learning failure was always to work hard, and like vice versa to trying to make an easy life. I didn't always make an easy life for myself, and I should have used more tools and sort of shortcuts. I would say I don't use enough shortcuts. And as a failure in defense, yeah, of course, I think the cybersecurity has a lot to do, of course, with trust, and I think it's also in terms of trust goes really together with control. So control and trust are very, and many people, even if they don't have trust issues or have trust issues with technology, that's the beauty of cybersecurity. It's this delicate interface exactly between people and technology. That's why I love it so much. They do have some control issues, and when you mix those together, it's a very explosive recipe for making mistakes. So I've done more than a few. Also, I worked for Microsoft for nearly a decade, so and I wrote some support tools in Windows Server. So I had my fair share of of adventures there.
Yeah, I wonder if the next generation would even bother to open a book. We're building stuff with AI for our solution. We are blending an interesting component, but still it would be very interesting how AI revolution was going to change both learning, but also like productize and defense and offense. We know that offensive people and attackers are always like one step ahead. But still AI is the big change for anything. And I wonder really how cybersecurity is going to look like in 10 years from now. I'm sure that people are not going to open like 300-page book as we did back then, because there are alternatives, faster alternatives. But when you think about critical thinking and anything that can make you like a good learner and someone who getting improved while running, I think the books are necessary. And I wonder how it's going to look like in 10 years because of that. Sure. I think that we can finish maybe looking back. You've been working quite some time in the industry. Like, what advice would you tell yourself, the young yourself, as a junior professional, to someone who starts his career now in cybersecurity, defense or offense? What kind of the best advice you can give this next generation kind of people?
Well, I would say to my younger junior security self, I would probably say, chill, relax. It's not your fault, because in IT security, cybersecurity, we didn't start the fire. It was always burning, so the one been turning, etc. And it's really hard to keep optimistic in this unfair battlefield that we're running as essentially defenders. Even if we do offensive work, it's just to improve defense, right? It's the only thing that we do day to day, day in and out. And I would say just to understand our role there, and I would say I would tell myself to use more tools and to use others more than I did, because I'm very work driven. So I love to work in teams, and teams is like, as Forrest Gump said, our box of chocolate. You never know what you get, but with communication mishaps, etc. But I was really privileged, still am, to work with some of the best teams throughout the years, and to learn a lot from others. And in terms of tools, I hope that AI will grow to be. I'm sure it will grow to be this two-edged sword. Anyway, as technology, as a dual concept, a dualistic concept is essentially, because already we're speaking now, we're close to, I think, Black Friday, and in less than 4 days, I see the stats from Netcraft that there are about close to 10,000 fake commerce websites uploaded in less than 4 days, and AI is getting is making the gap even bigger than what we discussed with XDR, etc. So I'm sure AI will step into its greater and play its greater part also for defense. That's why I'm very optimistic there. But before it does that, I guess the attackers will use it first and more intensely. But we'll be there. We'll be there to learn and hopefully use those tools for best. Looking forward to the next future defense tools that help buy more time for organizations.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super interesting the next decade for sure. As you said, I mean, what drives us is the challenge, is that it's complex, that it's interesting. And so it's going to be super interesting to see how it goes for the next decade. So I would like to thank you for the time. Yeah.
No, I'm saying everything can happen. If I was in a room, in a big conference room where Steve Ballmer called Linux cancer, and today Microsoft hugs Linux so much, then really everything can happen.
No, Ballmer is not a person who did good predictions with iPhone and anything like that.
But anything can happen, right?
Anything can happen. It's like we can't predict. Like, humans are not good with prediction for sure. But we need to enjoy the ride. It's going to be interesting. I'm optimistic as you are. It's very fun to work in this industry, in the cybersecurity. It's always like it's infinite in a way that it's never-ending journey in terms of learning new stuff and new operating system, new technology. So I guess we're on the same page in here.
Yes.
So I wanted to thank you for the time. It was pleasant as usual. I'll see you soon on a personal kind of level, but thanks again for the time. Super happy and enjoyed in this conversation. And see you very soon, man. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.